Hey, hey, hey! Back at it again. For those that don't know, my name is Maceo, and we're here. We're ready, and we're getting things going. So, um, we got a fun filled chat here with you guys, and I'm gonna be bringing on a friend of mine to talk about really, I think, a really apropos conversation, which is the power of art. And, we're going to make sure that that is key here. So, going to make sure that I have my administrative stuff taken care of and keep it going from there. All right. And I got to pin some stuff here. See how that goes. Little comments. And here we go. There we go. Hey.
It worked.
Every time I'm excited, it's like I'm my grandma or something. It's Ashtin, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Want to do a little check-in with you, but before we do check-in, maybe we'll do a little intro. Let people know who you are, what disposition you're speaking from, area expertise. I'll say that my name is Maceo Paisley. I'm an artist, dancer, and designer. I'm really passionate about the arts and what it can do for people's lives. I'm an ambassador for Create California. And I'm just bringing on people that I have IG crushes on, intellectual crushes on, to have this
Aw.
conversation. And it's just really just a way for me to have a platform that's not my platform to talk about it from other people. So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. I'm Ashtin Berry. Kind of the lane that people know me from is hospitality. I've been in the food and beverage industry for going on 15 years now. And I am really passionate about, um, equity, and how that shows up in spaces, how we construct spaces, with breadth and ways that see people uniquely. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Awesome, awesome. And your Instagram is _collectress.
It is.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I had it right.
No, not underscore. It's just at the collectress.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, you had it right.
Oh, I had it right. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, then we're going to do it this way then. I'm going to bump that one out of the way.
All good.
I was like, is there an underscore? All right.
Nope,
So,
no underscore.
so first thing, tell me how you end up doing what you're doing. What was your journey from little Ashtin in the playground to, Ashtin now, hospitality world, sommelier, F&B, all that. What happened in between? I'm sure you could say it in one sentence.
Yeah, I think what I was introduced to hospitality the way that a lot of people are, which is that the hospitality industry is a big employer of young people, and so I entered in that way. I was a hostess, and that was one of my first jobs, and then kind of just dabbled in other food service cafe things throughout college, throughout high school, throughout college, and then later on, I also worked in retail as well, which is a service oriented job. And I think it matches my personality. I was able to make my own schedule, and I also went to a really rigorous college, so it allowed me to make a living, but also still maintain and be able to be present for my work in school. So I think the flexibility of it was something that always kind of I liked. I liked the fact that you made your own money, and yeah, that's kind of yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. And so, what gave you idea that you could be a part of helping shape, change, bring visibility to different aspects of the industry besides just, working in it as a hostess or bartender or what have you, as just a practitioner, but also more than just like sculptor.
Right. I think, honestly, it came out of necessity. I really love the industry, but I was really unhappy with the way and the restrictions of how people were able to show up. The industry looks different than it did when I came in, but when I started, I was generally almost always the only person of color or one of very few people of color in front of the house. And so that just really shaped the fact that I was like, well, this is a problem because I know it's not because people don't want these jobs. I know it's not because people can't work it. Like there's an issue here. And I think just through my own kind of journey, trying to come up with systems and frameworks for there to be more people who look like me, but also not just me, but more people in general. Like when I say people of color, I don't just mean black people. I mean, there was a lack of everybody. And so I wanted to see that change specifically in wine spaces, specifically in fine dining spaces is kind of where I started really being passionate about it. But then I also there was always these conversations about how food brings us together, but I'd be working in spaces that were so homogenous. And I just wanted people to think about that because the people who work in those spaces, they certainly feel it.
The food certainly has the power and potential to bring us together, but only if we use it in that way. It can also
Only
divide
if
us.
we use it that way. And I think a lot of people talk about food brings us together, but then you look at their tables and it's super homogenous.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to really push the boundaries and say, no, if we're going to say food and beverage brings us together, then let's actually talk about who it's bringing together. And if it's not bringing us together, what are the barriers preventing that?
Right. So one of the things that we have to talk about here with the Create California initiative is the importance of art and an arts education on people's lives. One of the things that's really important to note is that California is a little bit ahead of some states in this area. They have it mandated that all the public schools should have arts education. But even before COVID, before quarantine, only 12% of the schools in the state were reaching that mandate. So part of this is helping people to understand how engaging with an arts education, with developing the skills that come with that, critical thinking, social skills, so forth and so on, how that actually can impact someone's life later on, whether or not they become a dancer like me or an actress or what have you.
Right.
And so I want to know a little bit about what was your experience and your upbringing as a young person. You certainly have style. We've talked about your interest in fashion, but how did you get um, to think of yourself as someone who could be creative? And what if any experience did you have with art growing up, of whatever kind, culinary, music, theater?
I had a lot of experience with art, with art and creativity. I think one of the reasons my brain works the way it does is because of the ways that I was introduced to different artistic and creative forms. And I think, I did dance for most of my life. Not only did I do dance, I was a chess player, which people don't think is art, but it is.
If you've ever played chess,
Art for
then you know
sure.
it's an art.
It's a mental art for sure. I also, I was a big nerd. I played the clarinet for 9 years.
Me too.
Yeah, I played the clarinet for 9 years, and my cousin taught me how to play her flute, and I taught her how to play mine. I also played the saxophone for a bit.
Me too.
And so, it really shaped the way that I think about the world. And I think one of the issues that we've gotten into in society is not seeing the value of art only for consumption purposes and not for construction purposes. And art in my life was so important. I wanted to be a designer. I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer for a lot of my life. As I said, I spent a lot of my life working in retail and high-end retail. I worked at Coach. And it's an outlet for the mind. It also, I think it speaks to the fact that people think in different ways, and we need to honor that people think in different ways. And by not giving the opportunity for kids to explore art and explore the way that that's part of the reason why I love Instagram and TikTok, right? Is it's giving youth a way to control the way that they put out artistic things in the world, even if it's not a certain type of caliber. What I love about it is the fact that they get to have ownership to explore. And artistic expression is about exploration, but to really get good at it, it's also about discipline.
Yeah.
And so it's so worthwhile to allow people the ability to create and see what comes of it, even if it takes growth. I used to write poetry. I was so into poetry. I think I was like super into poetry probably till around 24. But like I wanted to be a writer. Like I've always been very upset with the creative arts in many different forms. And I think fashion is art.
Yeah, absolutely. Fashion is definitely an art. I mean, not only in the respect that you have to be able to express your ideas in a visual format, you're literally taking something that doesn't exist and making it exist. I mean, that if that's not alchemy, I don't know what is. But also the idea that you can't just draw a picture of a shirt and that's the design of the shirt. You learn, like you said, discipline, process, and even with the clarinet or the saxophone, you might hear someone say something, play something, and you know it's going to take you a lot of practice to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I always say to myself, I'm always kind of disappointed that I stopped playing the clarinet. I wish it's something that my parents, even if in the moment I didn't love it, would have had me like made me stick to it, because it is such a release and such a beautiful format of being able to express yourself and emote. And I think that crosses over into the hospitality industry too. Like coming up and thinking about how to create dishes, thinking about how to create food, thinking about how to create. There's so much creativity to in how you create experiences, which is something that I don't think people think about.
Yeah, I think that's a one big part of the arts. When you think of theater, when you think of performance, is the hospitality of the experience. How are people going to get through the door and into their seats? The lights are going to go up, they're going to go down at a certain point. And they say this, that like a restaurant or hospitality is theater.
Yeah, it's a performance. It's absolutely a performance. And sometimes it's a great, immaculate performance. Sometimes it's a rocky performance. Sometimes it's an unexpected performance. When you go out to eat, you are basically going into this social contract that you are trusting the restaurant or the bar, wherever you go, to be able to deliver an experience that is up to your standards, but with very little input from you about what that experience is going to be like.
Yeah.
And so and the people who are the best are the people who really create this experience that create this intangible thing that you can't name, right? It wasn't the food, it wasn't the drink, it wasn't the exact seating, it wasn't it was this flawless compounding of all of these things together. And maybe your bartender really was the cherry on top, or maybe it was the effort seamlessly of how you just forgot you were in a restaurant that made it special. But whatever it is, tons of people went into the mechanics of making that happen, and that including the design. Design is a huge part of hospitality, and that in itself is the menu. How you look at a menu. I know we think menus don't matter, but menus in itself kind of prepare the mind for the experience you're about to have.
Right. I think that one of the things that I always trip out on is the writing on the menu. It's like, is it encrusted, or is it bread? You know what I mean? Is it seared? You know what I mean? Or like
yeah, what are the tons of ways that you can describe something, right? You can put something is you could just put eggs, or you could put poached egg. Like there's tons of different ways.
Right.
Butter, like there's a difference between saying aioli and mayo, right? There's a difference. There's so many different things that require creativity, and also not only just because you want to provide an experience, but also a lot of hospitality is trying to make and place a value on something that someone a lot of times could make at home.
Yeah, there's two things that you hit on. One, it's not necessarily about the food. This idea of it being an experience and how that experience is crafted, and how that actually requires a certain very high level of empathy to
Yes.
be able to dictate and listen to, both at the same time, dictate and listen to what, you know, a patron or a customer or a guest says they want versus what you have available, whether
It's
you're
there's
like, you know.
Yeah, there's order takers, and then there's people who are guardians of an experience, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then there's people who just take your order and they make it, and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but like if you're old school and you've been taught like the real craft, it's like it is about guiding people on an experience, and there's a ton of emotional labor attached to it.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody, my dad used to do like in-home catering for people's anniversary and stuff. But he goes, he's old school. He goes, I got all my training at Denny's. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, before I went to culinary school or any of that, they told us when you go to somebody's table, you say your name, you greet, you let them know that you're here to take care of them,
Most people
to
don't
take
realize
care of
this.
them. And
Yeah,
I was
most
like,
people don't realize
wow.
this, but uh, restaurants didn't get popular until the 1950s. It really wasn't possible for middle class or entry, like lower class families to be able to go to restaurants. It was like if you did, it was something you saved up for and you went to a nice place. But most people gathered in homes and things of that nature. Like restaurants were not a regular thing until the 1950s. And Denny's is actually one of your first family restaurants.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that. And so Denny's and TGI Fridays actually set a lot of the foundational standards for American service in this country. I know we like to talk about how the French definitely influenced the techniques in the back of the house, specifically in fine dining. But in terms of service, a lot of the service actually come from Southern hospitality kind of notions and frameworks. And Denny's, yeah, it's funny you mentioned Denny's. They're the oldest or one of the oldest family dining restaurants.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting how like now, you know, we can look at Denny's and we can be like, oh, that's chain or what have you. But part of what makes that chain, that franchise work is a standard of service, is a standard of real care. And I think you and I have talked about this as well. We don't often give hospitality individuals credit and also hold them responsibility for the space that they're holding and the social skills that they bring with them.
Yeah, we don't. We call a lot of emotion. We call a lot of the work that laborers do in hospitality. We refer to them as soft skills, which I believe is really inherently tied to the fact that the people who have always done those type of jobs have always been people of color, immigrant populations, even those ethnically white at the beginning of the turn of the century, and women, which would, in domestic labor, hospitality work is really correlated and related to domestic labor. And it's easy to dismiss it when patriarchy and sexism is built into socialized traditions. And I think that makes it easy to devalue it. But though there's nothing soft about the ability to negotiate the needs of others,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And even if it is soft, there's something very valuable for being able to do that.
Right, right.
And
It's just as, if not more difficult to meet a complete stranger and deliver them an experience that they're going to remember or enjoy just by
just
noticing body language and all kinds
just
of
think
stuff.
about how little information people give you, right? They might order a meal, but you have such little information to go on when someone actually comes and dines or sits at a table. Like, it's not like you get a profile about what this person's views are, what's going to make them happy, what's going to, like, none of that. You don't have any of that. So you're really off the cuff reading their body language, reading their tone, reading their pitch of voice, reading their eyebrows and rest of their body language to kind of discern what ways you can best give them great service.
One of the things that I think is fascinating about the connection between social emotional intelligence and art is this soft skills element. Like, as someone who played clarinet and somebody who would play music, Hashtag band geeks, you know. You're able to, the word that comes to mind is you're able to make sense of different sensory information than the one you're working with. Synesthesia. You can hear a loud noise and you can say, "Oh, loud. That's intensity. That's
Right.
that's anger." But then you can also say, "There's a time and place for love and for suspense and for pause." And when you're standing with someone or you're working with someone, there's not only the choreography of the back of house, right? But there's also the choreography and the dance of the front of house.
I mean,
as
I
well.
tell people all the time that, you know, I hate the positioning of back of the house versus front of the house because you know, it reminds me of plantation economies, honestly. But also the other reason I dislike it is because so much of how the front of the house work impacts how back of the house is able to be successful. From the hostess, the way the hostess seats, from the way that someone greets someone, from the way that someone puts in orders, right? From the messaging and the communication. The front of the house really sets the tone for the success of a restaurant, right? If they can make leeway for the people in the back of the house, if they know back of the house is kind of timed up, if they understand, you know, when rushes are, like there's so many skills. I think everybody should be required to work a service position, whether it be in food and beverage or be in retail, because it teaches you about your ability to, one, de-escalate when people are upset.
Oh yeah.
Right. Two, it teaches you how to negotiate. Like you know, no one's concerned if you're having a bad day when you work in service. And so how are you going to negotiate giving someone an experience when you're not at your best?
Yeah.
Right.
That checking in with yourself. All right, I'm gonna put on what I need to put on in order to do my job, and then I can make it through, you know, this shift, and then okay. But also, how do you prepare yourself for that?
How you prepare yourself. And so there's a lot of different things, and I think the biggest issue is that it's not transparently talked about enough. But yeah, I mean, we see right now who is keeping this country going. We see right now the essential workers, and yes, that includes hospitality. That includes, like, you know, hospitals and medical workers, but it includes a lot of service workers. You know, liquor stores are busier than they've ever been. That's an extension of the hospitality industry. Grocery stores, hospitality industry. Many of the grocery stores we now go to in New York always have bodega style, have people who are working in food service, like, directly in these spaces. And so we see these are the people that we are reliant on more than we thought we were. And so it's just important to kind of remember that.
One of the things I always think is interesting about, I guess, like the art of hospitality is how it mirrors, when you say guardians of an experience, how it mirrors individuals' agency to be contributory to what society looks like at large. Whereas you're managing expectations, you're helping people to determine what decorum is, what norms is, what is okay and what's not okay as a member of this institution, as like the hostess, for example, and how everyone you meet, you're kind of like the hostess for your own relationship,
Right.
know? And you can say, you know, hey, you know, the kitchen is a little backed up, so I'm gonna give you guys to order a little bit of apps that we can get out quickly, and then pace it so that they're not upset.
I think
or ask, you know, are you guys in a rush?
If you're really good, you don't even need to ask that, right? Like, if you're
Mm-hmm.
really good, you go to a table and you say, "What's your evening looking like? Do we have something planned after this?"
Yeah.
You ask all of your tables, and based on who says that they have time to breathe and who says thing, you construct the orders based on that, and you do things. When I would never tell my tables that we were backed up unless it was like really, really bad. I would go to them and I'd say, "What does our evening look like?" Oh, you guys have to go thing, and then I'd steer them towards the dishes that I know we're going to be able to be in certain places and picked up quicker, right? Oh, well, then I definitely recommend this, and I'd recommend this. If you want this, it is going to take a little bit longer, and I know you guys are on a time. I know you guys have a, you know, restriction on time, and then vice versa. If someone had room to wait, I'd say, "Oh, wow, well, let's really get you guys some appetizers, some share plates. Then let's maybe get you guys another drink, and then right when you're like feeling like really settled in and talking, we can get your food on the table." And
Right.
I also always worked on a quality over quantity. I'd rather serve 5 tables all night than 45 tables, right? Like
Right.
I'd rather have 5 tables or maybe one turn, so 10 tables all night that I serve the whole evening and really give them an experience and get the ROI on that and create relationships that can possibly be regulars than Turn and Burn. Now, have I worked at Turn and Burn places? Absolutely, but those were like super high volume. I'm ringing up 3 to 6 grand a night as one
Yeah.
part. That's
There's those experiences are special to the point where, you remember, oh man, I was in Chicago one time. I went to this restaurant, and now every time I go to Chicago, I'm gonna make sure I stop by.
yeah. I mean, I had regulars who I would see only once a year, but once every time they were back in town, they would call the restaurant and be like, "What shift is Ashtin working?" And they'd come in and they'd see me,
And that's an
yeah,
interesting thing, looking at it. Looking at one, what you said, art for consumption versus art for construction, and then the third, art for connection. I'm relationship building here. It's not just the food. It's not even just the experience, but it's a
it's
platform for us to connect humanity
yeah,
on
it's
our,
it's it's a platform, and that's why I say like that's why what I kind of meant by like art as construction, because like you're constructing a space, right? And I think like art is a tool to do that, and art comes in many different formats. I mean, music is an integral part of the dining experience. It's so important for the dining
Mhm.
experience, and so what type of music are we playing? What volume is it at? Does it change throughout the service, right? How do we prep people for the experience that they're about to have? Same thing with lighting. Lighting is so, 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 so important now, in theater, in dance, and also in
Yeah.
dining. And also in bars, right? And so it's constructing spaces is so important in everything, but specifically in
The connection,
hospitality.
yeah, the
Because
connection you're making there for me is one where music, lighting, art, the social skills, if you want to call them soft skills, those are all things that you really only notice when they're done wrong. It's when it's all perfect, you don't even realize, it's just like, oh, the music was a little loud, the lighting was a little bright, or it was a little dark, the waiter, the wait staff was a little bit this or that. But when it's perfect, you're like, you know what? I It was great, and it was like you said, the music was great, the food was great, the service was great, and nothing. There's no edges to the experience. It's just blended into the seamless experience. So, um, when you think about when I want to go back to this thing about way your brain works, there are kids that are neurodivergent and that are not into the linear thinking, and they're put in a different classroom with different expectations. But these are the exact kinds of minds that can make sense of a
right,
complex environment where
right.
there's so many different stimuli.
I mean, I think one of the issues with American education, period, is the way that we only value one specific type of mental processing and the one type of thinking, one way of thinking. And I think that's harmful for everyone. It's especially harmful for children, though, who are still kind of growing and their mind is still trying to figure out how they process. And so I think it's important to just kind of make sure that we're opening up the lens of like how we educate, and how we also destigmatize different mental processing steps. Art is a way to show people, yeah, such and such didn't shine in math, but look at the way they're shining here, right? And that's okay. That's okay for us to have skills here and there. And I also think it brings us into
Or even that maybe they didn't shine in algebra, but they shined
right,
in geometry.
right. I love
You know,
geometry.
or
Yeah,
that they didn't shine in basic math, but the same kids who struggle with basic math, many of them are great at calculus and trigonometry
right.
because it
And so
takes
and
different.
it takes different types of brains. Calculus and trigonometry is very different. You can be really great at physics and struggle with other sciences
Yeah.
really hard. right?
Yep. Just like you
And
could be bad at dancing but good at painting,
all of these things.
which is
And
me.
so
Or I'm good at
all of these
dancing.
things. You can be an incredible writer and struggle with verbal communication,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, there's, it's important to show people a range of how we can show up in the world. Right now, I think specifically in this country, we have too of a limited way of, it's too limited in terms of how people are able to show up. And I think that honestly, the hospitality industry sometimes attracts people because it allows for so much flexibility in how you can show up.
Yeah, you can come and figure out what place you're of best service. Like there's certain people that know, oh, I could never survive this job. I could never do it. And then there's certain people that are like, oh, I could never talk to people all night. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but then even, being behind the bar, there's some people who are like, I really want to be a bartender. Some people are like, that feels claustrophobic. I want to be able to roam the floor. I love being the maitre d'. There's some people who are like, I don't want to own the entire experience. I love being the hostess. There's some people who are like, there's the support team, right? There's an entry level for you to kind of get your bearings and learn and see what kind of would you like.
Yeah, yeah. So when you think about, your trajectory of, you started off as a young person trying to figure out who you were. You were doing all this art, you were into the fashion industry, and then you got caught in, and not caught in a negative way, but like caught up, enraptured, enticed, and you decided to stay in the hospitality industry and build there. What now are you looking forward to creating and building, and what are you envisioning and imagining, either for the industry, either for the for yourself, or even for the experience of hospitality itself? What do you?
I mean, if people don't know, the hospitality industry is one of the hardest hit industries in the country right now due to COVID. And I think the numbers so far are that 30% of restaurants have 30% of restaurants are closing, and the numbers just getting higher and higher by the month. And so that's going to deeply impact the way the industry looks. I think that we were getting oversaturated in terms of the number of restaurants. I think we were getting into a culture where people had 8 restaurants under them, and I don't know that restaurants groups are a healthy thing for us to have. Franchises are a little bit different from restaurant groups, but I think, and I don't know that everything needs to be franchised either, but I think that getting back to the small mom and pop direct ownership is something that I hope to see us getting back to, and not expanding and not trying to open 2, 3, 4, 5 restaurants when you can't run 2, 3, 4, 5 restaurants in a way that's equitable and treats the laborers right. I'm hoping we get back to that. I'm hoping that we get back to smaller spaces. Again, speaking of just consumption, there was a lot of, suddenly I was starting to see all these spaces where people were opening up 100-person dining rooms, which, that's not necessary. We don't need 100-person dining rooms, right? I hope we get back to some more intimate dining spaces that allow the people who are working there to actually care and curate that experience in a way. And of course, there will always be fast volume places, and that's all good and dandy. But I'm hoping that we slow down and we get small.
Yeah, I love that.
Small. Get back small, and so we can get back to the root of why we do it and how we do it. And then I hope that the fun casual places that are just supposed to be that fun and casual come back too. I think we're starting to get to a point where everything had to be a craft beer, a craft cocktail, and I'm not saying that everything shouldn't be of quality, but it's okay to have a place that isn't over concerned with meeting the standards of what fine dining or casual fine dining or kind of styles the restaurants want.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, Ashton, I want to thank you so much for your time. I really feel like you were able to help us see the connection between humanity and hospitality, the connection between art and the culinary industry, and also some deeper things about intimacy between all of us. So, again, thank you for your time. Everybody
Thank you.
follow the collectress if you don't know, and I'm gonna let you get to your day, but enjoy it.
Bye.
All right.